I've been dropped into a story again. This time, I've landed squarely in the middle of a standard regret and redemption romance novel. The kind where the ex-wife grovels through hell to win back the man she took for granted. In this narrative, the male and female leads are supposed to be the envy of everyone. But in the heroine's heart, there's always been a special, reserved spot for her childhood best friend, a guy she treats like a younger brother. For his sake, she repeatedly walks away from her partner, at their engagement party, during birthday celebrations, on their anniversaries. All it takes is one phone call from Julian, and she leaves without hesitation. And the man labeled the protagonist, me apparently, actually put up with this for 3 years. He waited until the very last ember of hope burned out, then silently packed his bags and moved overseas. Only after he vanished did the heroine finally wake up and start down that scorching, humiliating road of trying to win him back. When I woke up, my first sensation was constriction. Not a chokehold, but the tightness of a suit jacket across my chest. It was the kind of bespoke, expensive fit that looks great but makes you want to rip the buttons off. My stomach hurt, too, cramping in waves like someone was wringing it out like a wet towel. People were bustling around me, their voices hushed, carrying that specific mix of chaotic energy and forced cheer typical of an engagement gala. I was sitting in a dressing room chair. I looked up and saw a man in the mirror. Sharp suit, perfectly knotted tie. His face wasn't breathtaking, but he was clean-cut and refined, the kind of guy you look at and think he's husband material. Except right now, his face was pale, and there was a heavy exhaustion under his eyes. I stared at him for 2 seconds. Then, the realization floated to the surface. I knew this face. I knew it too well. I knew it so well my heart sank, and I almost swore out loud. Caleb Hayes, the doormat protagonist who gets wasted for 3 years before finally dying inside and moving to London. And now I was in Phoenix. I've jumped into a book again, and it's happening again. Compared to the panic of the first time, I couldn't even muster the energy to be shocked. I just felt a deep, absurd sense of déjà vu. Like getting struck by lightning multiple times, eventually you just instinctively duck. The plot flooded my brain without permission. This was a textbook redemption arc. Caleb and the heroine were ostensibly a great match, about to get engaged, a model couple in the public eye. The problem was the heroine, Elena Vance. Gentle, poised, a powerhouse at work, always polite and thoughtful with outsiders. But she had a godbrother placed firmly at the top of her priority list. Julian Ross, her childhood neighbor, the boy she grew up with. All she had to say was he's sensitive, and that justified every instance of favoritism. For this guy, she had abandoned Caleb at engagement dinners, birthday parties, and dating anniversaries time and time again. It was always the same excuse. He's not feeling well. He's in a bad place mentally. I'm all he has. The original Caleb believed it. He believed it for 3 years. Thinking about it made my stomach cramp harder. Not from the plot, but from the sheer injustice of it. Caleb, a familiar, soft voice, pulled me back to reality. I looked up to see a woman standing at the dressing room door. Elena. She was wearing a pale evening gown, her makeup flawless. She should have been the most radiant person in the building. But right now, her brows were slightly furrowed, clutching her phone, her expression clearly distracted. I didn't even have to guess what was coming next. Sure enough, she took 2 steps closer and lowered her voice. Julian just called me. Here we go. He says he's really not feeling well. I need to go check on him. Her tone was light, as if she were discussing it with me. But the content left no room for discussion. The dressing room went silent for a beat. Outside, the engagement gala had already begun. The guests were seated, the MC was warming up the crowd, and the background music was inappropriately cheerful. And here I was, the groom-to-be, hung out to dry backstage. If I were the original Caleb, I'd be rationalizing it right now. She's just soft-hearted. He's like a brother to her. She's just going to check. She'll be back soon. But the guy sitting here now was me. I looked at her and suddenly found the scene almost funny. Not satirical funny, but the helpless humor of course this is happening. The original host's memories and emotions surged up. 3 years of concessions, expectations, disappointments, and endless self-gaslighting. The engagement party was just the start. There was a whole laundry list of humiliations waiting down the line. I didn't speak immediately. Elena seemed to be waiting for my sign-off. There was a trace of anxiety in her eyes, but mostly habit. She was used to me nodding, used to me saying, "It's okay, go ahead." That was her problem. It wasn't that she didn't know I would be hurt. She just took for granted that I would swallow it. I looked at myself in the mirror and curled the corner of my mouth. I wasn't smiling for her. I was smiling for myself. Phoenix, a redemption arc, is it? Well, this time, I'm not playing the martyr. Go ahead. I said, my voice unexpectedly steady. Elena visible relaxed. She nodded, her tone carrying a hint of apology. I'll be back really soon. She turned and walked away, her steps showing zero hesitation. The moment the door closed, the dressing room fell completely silent. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. My stomach still hurt. The suit was still tight. But worse than the physical discomfort was the nauseating feeling of a scripted fate. Outside was the party. Inside was the abandoned groom. In the original text, this was the day Caleb swallowed his dignity whole. It was the day he completely resigned himself to being second best. I opened my eyes and looked at the mirror again. The eyes of the man in the reflection were different now. All right, I whispered, not sure who I was talking to. I know the script, but this time I'm going off book. The engagement party ended normally, all things considered. Elena didn't come back too late. She made it before the toasts. Her makeup was intact, her gown unruffled, looking as if she had just stepped out to powder her nose. No one knew she had left the building. Except me. She stood beside me, her hand naturally looping through my arm, a perfect smile on her face. To the outside world, we were still the loving power couple. While the MC read through the program, she whispered an explanation to me. It was just a stomach ache. He's fine now. Her tone was casual, like she was talking about the weather. I nodded once and didn't reply. She seemed to sense my quietness and glanced at me sideways. Seeing my expression was normal, she quickly looked away. After the party, the crowd dispersed. I stood at the entrance of the ballroom, watching the waiters clear the tables and sweep up the flower petals. The scene gave me a weird sense of familiarity. It wasn't the first time. Seriously, it wasn't the first time. On the ride home, the car was silent. Elena sat in the passenger seat, head down, fingers flying across her phone screen. I didn't need to look to know who she was texting. When we stopped at a red light, she suddenly spoke. Thanks for handling everything today. You worked hard. I gave a non-committal. She paused, then added, I'll take you out for a nice dinner soon, make up for it. I had heard that line plenty of times. Soon. And that soon never came. Outside the window, neon lights blurred by. My brain, however, started uncontrollably auditing the past. The original host's memories were forced open like a ledger, pages flapping in front of my eyes. The first time was my birthday. I had reserved the restaurant weeks in advance, picked the window seat she liked. I picked up the cake myself, getting a smudge of frosting on my hand. Minutes ticked into hours. She didn't show. When I called, her voice was frantic. Julian is in a bad headspace. I need to stay with him. I ate that cake alone. It was sweet, cloyingly sweet. The second time was our anniversary. She promised. We had movie tickets. Right before we left, she got a call. The same tired excuse. He's not doing well lately. I watched the movie alone. I couldn't tell you a single thing about the plot. The third time, I had the flu. 102 fever, completely delirious. She was there at first, pouring water, getting meds. Then her phone rang. She stood by the bed, hesitated for a few seconds, then put on her coat. He's alone at his apartment. I'm worried. The door didn't slam shut. But in that moment, the fever broke into a cold clarity. The original Caleb tolerated all of it. He told himself over and over that she did not care. She was just too soft-hearted. Looking at it now, it was absurd. It wasn't soft-heartedness. It was assumption. She assumed I would wait. Assumed I would understand. Assumed I wouldn't leave. The car stopped in the underground garage. I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out first. Elena followed, her pace a little slower than usual. She looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Inside the apartment, she put down her bag and habitually walked toward the kitchen. I'll make you some pasta, she said. This was her standard compensation method, a bowl of pasta to offset every absence. I stood in the living room watching her busy back. Under the warm light, her profile was as gentle as ever. But I suddenly realized something. 3 years. Every choice she made was fast. So fast she didn't need to hesitate. The only one hesitating had been me. Forget it, I said. She turned to look at me, surprise in her eyes. Didn't you say your stomach hurt earlier? Get some rest. My tone was flat, void of emotion. She froze for a second, then nodded. You get some sleep too, then. She turned and went to the bedroom. After the door closed, I was the only one left in the living room. I sat on the sofa without turning on the lights. It was too quiet. I suddenly remembered a line from the original text. It was how the author described the protagonist. It wasn't that he didn't feel pain. He had just gotten used to it. But habits are fragile things. Once interrupted, they're hard to pick back up. I leaned back against the sofa cushions and let out a long breath. A thought was crystallizing in my mind. This man wasn't a loser. He wasn't incompetent. He had simply been eroded bit by bit. And now it was my turn. No, to be accurate, it was my turn to stop. I didn't sleep well that night. Not insomnia, just waking up too early. The sky wasn't even light when I opened my eyes. The other side of the bed was empty. I didn't know when Elena had gotten up. She hadn't made a sound. I sat there for a while, then got up to wash. The face in the mirror looked tired, but not tragic. I knew this state too well. Every time she stayed up late dealing with Julian's drama, I basically woke up alone the next morning. When I walked into the living room, there was a glass of cold water on the table. Beside it was a sticky note. I went in early. Breakfast is in the kitchen. The handwriting was neat, as always. Just like her, always appearing appropriate on the surface. I didn't touch the breakfast. I didn't text her either. Before, I would have. I would have reminded her to wear a coat because it was cold, or asked if she slept well. Now, there was no need. I went to the office as usual. The work wasn't heavy, just fragmented. Colleagues mentioned the engagement party, saying it looked beautiful. I nodded and played along, offering no details. They didn't know what happened backstage. I didn't plan on telling them. During lunch, my phone buzzed. It was Elena. She asked if I wanted to grab dinner tonight. Her tone was natural, as if nothing had happened. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "We'll see." Sending that felt strangely novel. I never replied like that before. It used to be either a yes or a detailed explanation of why I was busy. Now, I was just keeping my options open. I got off work a bit later than usual. When I got home, the lights were on. Elena was back. She had changed into loungewear and was busy in the kitchen. Something was simmering on the stove, smelling savory. Hearing me enter, she looked back. "You're back? Wash up, dinner's ready." Her tone was gentle, no different for any other day. I grunted in acknowledgement and hung up my coat. There were 2 dishes and a soup on the table. She had put effort into it. We sat down to eat. The atmosphere wasn't awkward, but it wasn't warm either. She occasionally mentioned something about work. I listened and gave short responses. Halfway through, she suddenly stopped her chopsticks and looked at me. "Why are you so quiet today?" I picked up a piece of broccoli, my voice flat. "Tired." She didn't press. She just nodded. After dinner, she started clearing the table, as usual. I didn't jump up to help like I used to. Sitting on the sofa, I heard her take a call in the kitchen. Her voice dropped low, but the tone shifted instantly. It was that familiar, soothing gentleness. I didn't need to think to know who it was. She talked for a while. When she came out, she looked hesitant. "Julian wanted me to come over." She stood in front of me and said it directly. This time, she didn't make up an excuse. It was like she assumed I already knew the drill. I looked up at her. There was a trace of nervousness in her expression, waiting for my reaction. In the past, I would have frowned. I would have reminded her it was late, asked when she'd be back. Not now. I stood up, took the car keys from the coffee table, and under her gaze, placed them back down on the console by the door. "Go ahead," I said. She was visibly stunned. "You're not driving me?" I shook my head. I have things to handle. It was the truth. It was just that the things had nothing to do with her. She stood there, motionless for a few seconds, like she was trying to process the sentence. Then, "I'll try to be back early," she said. I nodded, offering no other response. The sound of the door closing was soft. But this time, I didn't stand there listening to her footsteps fade away. I went to the study and opened my laptop. The moment the screen lit up, I felt a long-lost sense of focus. Time passed quickly. When I looked up, it was nearly midnight. The living room lights were still on. Elena wasn't back yet. I walked out to get water and checked the time. 12:10. Before, I would have texted asking where she was. Now, nothing. I finished the water and put the glass away. Shortly after I sat back down, the lock clicked. Elena was back. She looked at me while changing her shoes, seemingly surprised I was still up. Not in bed yet. She walked in and sat opposite me. Fatigue was etched on her face. "Julian was pretty emotional today," she explained. I didn't reply. The air went silent. Unnaturally silent. She frowned, as if finally realizing something. "Are you unhappy?" I looked at her, not answering immediately. Her expression grew serious, waiting for a clear verdict. "No," I said. It was the truth. I wasn't unhappy. I just didn't care as much anymore. She clearly didn't believe me, but couldn't find a way to refute it. "Well, get some rest soon," she said, standing up. I nodded. She went to the bedroom. After the door closed, I sat on the sofa, unmoving. The apartment was quiet. Quiet enough to hear the clock ticking. I suddenly realized something. It wasn't that I stopped talking. It was that I stopped cooperating. And that shift was more unsettling than an argument. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. Elena was already up. The bedroom showed signs of being tidied. The duvet folded neatly, as if deliberately done. When I came out washed and dressed, she was setting breakfast at the table. Seeing me, she instinctively looked up. "Sleep okay?" she asked. Her tone was natural, but laced with a hint of uncertainty. All right, I said. I sat down and ate, offering no extra conversation. She sat across from me, her eyes drifting to my face now and then, like she was checking something or waiting for me to speak. I didn't give her the opening. Before leaving, I didn't remind her to grab her keys like I usually did. She paused at the entryway, stunned for a second, then checked her bag herself. At the office, I focused entirely on work. My efficiency over the last few days had been startlingly high. During my lunch break, I went to the bank. I restructured some funds that were originally in our joint accounts. The process wasn't complicated, just required me to be there in person. When the clerk verified my information, I stated my name, Caleb Hayes. Saying it out loud, I felt calm. That name was no longer just a character in a plot. It was the person I was now responsible for. In the afternoon, I contacted a headhunter. I went through all the overseas job offers I had previously ignored. I sent emails one by one. Brief, clear, decisive. When I got home that evening, Elena was already there. She was sitting on the sofa and stood up immediately when I walked in. Her movement was a little rushed. "Why are you so late today?" she asked. Something came up. She nodded, but didn't press for details like she used to. She just followed me into the living room. "Are you really busy lately?" My hand paused while hanging up my coat. Yeah, I could feel her emotions bubbling up, but she tamped them down. Dinner was takeout she had ordered. We sat at the table, eating separately. She didn't eat much. Her fork paused frequently. "Are you angry?" she finally asked. I looked up. "What do you think?" She was taken aback by the question. "I don't know." She frowned. "You're different these past few days." "Different how?" She opened her mouth, but didn't speak immediately. After a few seconds, she lowered her voice. "You don't ask anymore." The sentence hung in the air. I didn't deny it. "Before, you'd ask where I went, when I'd be back," she continued. "Now you don't ask anything. Isn't that better?" I said. Her expression stiffened visibly. She might have anticipated many answers, but not that one. After dinner, I dragged a suitcase out of the storage closet. I didn't hide it from her. The wheels rolling on the floor made a distinct sound. Elena stood at the kitchen doorway, watching me. "Are you going on a business trip?" "No." I opened the suitcase and started packing some seasonal clothes. My movements were unhurried. She took 2 steps closer, her voice dropping. "Then where are you going?" "Haven't decided yet." Truth, but obviously not a good answer for her. She stood there in silence for a long time. "Are you planning to go abroad?" I stopped and glanced at her. "I'm thinking about it." Her breath hitched. "What? Work?" She wanted to argue, but couldn't find a valid reason. Because I definitely had the qualifications, and I had definitely been invited before. That night, she slept very late. She tossed and turned far more than usual. I slept just fine. Over the next few days, the rhythm of my life became clearer. I stopped memorizing her schedule. I didn't remind her of the time. I didn't stop what I was doing when she took phone calls. She started probing frequently. In the morning, asking if I was tired. In the evening, asking if I wanted to watch TV together. I agreed to everything, but I only went through the motions. On the weekend, she suggested we visit her parents. I said I had work at the company. She stood at the door, watching me for a long time. Finally, she left alone. Julian started appearing more frequently. Not just calls anymore. Sometimes he came directly to the apartment. That evening, I arrived home to find him sitting in the living room. He was wearing a clean white shirt, looking a bit sheepish. Seeing me, he immediately stood up. "Caleb." He said the name smoothly. Elena came out of the kitchen, her tone lighter than usual. He was in the neighborhood, so he came up to sit for a bit. I nodded once, acknowledging him. Julian's eyes darted between Elena and me, like he was gauging the atmosphere. "Elena's been really tired lately," he said. "Busy with work, worrying about the house." He said it naturally, like it was his place to say it. I glanced at him. His eyes were innocent, his expression guileless, but his posture was relaxed, lacking the restraint of a guest. I suddenly understood something. He wasn't unaware of boundaries. He was just used to them being erased for him. "You guys chat," I said. "I'll be in the study." I got up and left without looking at them again. Behind me, I heard Elena's voice like she wanted to call me back, but she stopped. Study door closed. I sat at my computer. As the screen lit up, I knew clearly I was extracting myself, and they were only just beginning to notice. Saturday night was Elena's mother's birthday. She had reminded me a week in advance. Said it was a casual family dinner. Told me not to push it off for work. I agreed, not out of anticipation, but because some things should end where they're supposed to end. The dinner was at a classic, upscale restaurant. The private room wasn't huge, but everyone was there. Elena's parents, her aunt, and Julian. He was sitting in the seat next to Elena. It looked natural, like that seat belonged to him. When I walked in, he looked up and greeted me. Caleb. His tone was obedient as ever. I nodded and took a seat on the other side. Elena's mother grabbed my hand, chatting warmly, her words full of plans for after the engagement. Elena listened, occasionally chipping in. On the surface, the vibe was harmonious. Once the food arrived, everyone started eating. I noticed a detail. When Julian reached for a dish, Elena would instinctively spin the lazy Susan for him. If he ate his soup too slowly, she'd hand him a spoon. She did these things too proficiently. So proficiently it didn't look like temporary caretaking. I kept my head down and ate, not joining the conversation. Halfway through the meal, the topic somehow turned to me. Elena's aunt smiled and asked, "Is Caleb really busy with work lately?" Elena says you're always working overtime. Before I could speak, Julian chimed in. Caleb is definitely busy, he said, looking at me, his tone light. But sometimes when you're too busy, it's easy to neglect the people around you. The room went quiet for a beat. The words weren't harsh, but they were calculated, like he was voicing a grievance on someone else's behalf. Elena frowned and looked at Julian. Why bring that up? It sounded like a rebuke, but it wasn't heavy. Julian lowered his head, fingers gripping his chopsticks. I just feel like, Elena, you've been really tired lately. His voice grew softer. You don't have to carry everything alone. Elena's expression changed instantly. I'm fine, she said, but her voice was more urgent than before. I put down my chopsticks and watched. Julian's shoulders slumped slightly, like he'd been terribly wronged. Forget it, he said. Maybe I'm overthinking it. The air grew tight. Elena's mother tried to smooth things over, telling everyone to eat. But the awkwardness hung thick in the room. A moment later, Julian suddenly stood up. I'm going to the restroom. He walked out quickly. Elena clearly couldn't sit still. Her eyes followed him out, then snapped back. I continued eating, not stopping her. Minutes later, the door pushed open. Julian stood there, eyes red, clearly emotional. Elena. His voice trembled. Elena shot up. What's wrong? Should I not have come? He looked at her, like he couldn't hold it back anymore. Being here, does it just make everyone uncomfortable? The room went dead silent. He took a breath, like he made a big decision. Does Caleb just really dislike me? When he said this, his gaze finally landed on me. Everyone else's eyes followed. I didn't answer immediately. Elena beat me to it. Don't talk nonsense, she said, her tone clearly siding with him. Nobody dislikes you. She turned to me, brows furrowed tight. If you have a problem, just say it. Don't make him feel like this. The accusation landed squarely on my head. I finally looked up at her. Her expression held urgency, defensiveness. The only thing missing was hesitation. I pushed my chair back slightly. The movement wasn't big, but the scrape against the floor was loud. What problem would I have? I asked. Julian stood there, knuckles white. I know you don't like me clinging to Elena, he said, but she's really all I have. Heavy words, and familiar ones. Elena's face changed instantly. Don't say that. She walked over to him, hand on his shoulder, comforting him. Watching this, I suddenly felt there was nothing left to discuss. It wasn't anger. It was verification. I put down my napkin and stood up. So you always knew I was enduring it. When the words came out, my voice was calm. I didn't raise the volume. The room was terrifyingly quiet. Elena froze. She looked back at me, her face suddenly draining of color. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't wait for her reaction. Enjoy your dinner, I said. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, people were calling my name. Chaos in their voices. I didn't stop. Walking out of the restaurant, the night wind hit me. It felt much better than the air inside. I stood by the curb and hailed a cab. Before getting in, I glanced back. The restaurant entrance was bright. Inside the windows, shadows moved. This time, Elena didn't chase after me. Since that dinner, the apartment became much quieter. Not a Cold War, just parallel lives like we'd reached a sudden, silent understanding. Elena didn't bring up that night again. She went to work, came home, her tone as gentle as before. Except she started watching me constantly. At dinner, checking if I took an extra bite. When I changed my shoes, checking if I put my briefcase in the usual spot. She was verifying if I was still in her orbit. Meanwhile, my plans moved fast. The day my visa came through, I picked it up after work. The folder was thin, but it felt heavy in my hand. Back home, I put it in the study drawer. I didn't hide it, didn't announce it. The next evening, Elena got home first. When I arrived, she was sitting in the study chair. The drawer was open. Instantly, I knew she'd seen it. "You're going abroad?" She stood up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was frantic. I hung up my coat and walked over. My eyes swept the desk. She had neatly res-hacked the papers. "Yeah," I said. She took a deep breath. "When?" This week, at those 2 words, her face changed visibly. So soon, the process is done. She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Why didn't you tell me? I thought for a moment. You've been busy. No emotion in the words. But it left her unable to respond. She barely slept that night. I could feel it. The frequency of her turning, the change in her breathing. Just before dawn, she suddenly sat up. Caleb, I opened my eyes and looked at her. Are you blaming me? Her voice was tight. I didn't answer immediately. If you think I did something wrong, we can talk about it, she continued. There's no need to go this far. I sat up, leaning against the headboard. How far is this far? I asked. She fell silent for a few seconds. Leaving? I nodded. Do you think I'm leaving all of a sudden? She opened her mouth, but she couldn't answer. She still came to the airport. I hadn't told her the flight time, but she found out somehow. When I pushed my luggage into the terminal, I saw her at the entrance. Her hair was a bit messy, like she'd rushed. Barely any makeup. She walked fast, blocking my path. Do you have to go? People were streaming around us. She didn't care. I stopped and looked at her. I don't have to, I said. I just chose this path. Her eyes reddened quickly. What about me? She asked directly. I thought for a second and answered just as directly. You have your place. Her breath hitched. I can change, she said, her voice spiraling out of control. I really can. I looked at her. She wasn't acting. She was genuinely panicked. But I knew deep down, some seats, once occupied for too long, are hard to vacate. It's not that you won't change, I said. It's just that every time, there's someone ahead of me in line. She shook her head, wanting to deny it. That's just him. She stopped halfway, because she realized she'd used that explanation too many times. The PA system announced boarding. I pulled my boarding pass from my bag. She stared at the paper, her fingers curling into fists. Can you? Just wait. This time, her voice cracked into a sob. I didn't answer. I just pushed my suitcase forward a step. She finally broke, not wailing, just that suppressed, uncontrollable weeping of someone trying to hold it together. People nearby glanced over. I stood there, not moving to comfort her. It wasn't cruelty. It was the clarity that one more concession would just send us back to square one. I do not care about you, she said. I know, I cut her off. I really knew. She didn't suddenly become like this. She had always been like this. The gate opened. I checked the time and adjusted my backpack. Take care of yourself, I said. When I said it, I was calm. But she looked like the strength had been drained from her body. She stood there, not chasing anymore. I turned and walked toward the gate. Behind me was the noise of the airport. Footsteps, announcements, the hum of the crowd. In that moment, I knew. The crematorium, the hell of regret, only truly ignited the moment I boarded that plane. The day I landed, I barely stopped moving. From the airport straight to the corporate apartment. The next morning, orientation, handovers, meetings. Time was chopped into fine pieces. The pace was fast. Fast enough that I didn't have time to think. This state suited me perfectly. No gaps meant no unnecessary emotional drain. Work went smoother than I expected. Clear projects, defined responsibilities. No one needing me to be more understanding. Hours were fixed. Back at the apartment that night, I realized for the first time that silence doesn't have to be oppressive. It wasn't until the third day that I opened my phone and scrolled through the backlog of messages. Most were from Elena. At first asking about my itinerary. Then explanations. Then apologies. Her tone got lower with each one. The messages got longer. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. I genuinely didn't know what to say. Despite the time difference, she kept sending them. Sometimes day, sometimes middle of the night. There was one text I stared at for a long time. She said she started realizing the house felt like it was missing something. Not an object, but an order. She had never said that before. I placed the phone face down and went back to work. Life here didn't require me to constantly validate my existence. Do the work, get the result. A week later, she appeared in front of me for the first time. No warning. She came straight to the office building. I paused when I got the call from reception. When I went down to the lobby, she was standing there, wearing a trench coat, looking exhausted. Seeing me, she walked over quickly. You've lost weight. The opening was abrupt. I nodded, acknowledging it. Is something wrong? She clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct. She froze for a few seconds before speaking. I took time off. I want to talk to you. I checked my watch. 30 minutes. She nodded fast. We found a coffee shop nearby. After sitting down, her hand never left her cup. I've thought a lot, she said, and reflected a lot. I listened, not interrupting. I used to think you just understood me, so I took some things for granted. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. I nodded. And now? I asked. She looked up at me. Now I realize it wasn't understanding. You were retreating. She nailed it. I didn't deny it. Her eyes brightened slightly, like she'd finally found the right direction. I can draw clear boundaries. I can let him handle his own problems. When she said him, she didn't use a name. I took a sip of water. Why couldn't you before? She opened her mouth. This time, she didn't answer immediately. The 30 minutes passed quickly. I stood up. I have a meeting. She stood up too, panic flashing across her face. Can we see each other again later? I looked at her. Work is busy. The truth. She didn't try to stop me again. She just stood there, watching me leave. In the days following, she appeared more often. Sometimes near the office. Sometimes downstairs at my apartment. No scenes, no arguing. Just waiting. She started telling me about things back home. How she adjusted her schedule. Halfway through, she suddenly stopped. Julian is not doing well lately. Ich glänzte her. She quickly added, I haven't stepped in, saying it seemed to surprise even her. Like it was the first time she'd ever voiced that decision. He's not adapting, she whispered. He was used to me taking care of everything. And now he thinks I've changed. I nodded. You have changed. She looked at me. What about you? I didn't answer right away. During that time, my work entered a critical phase. More overtime, longer meetings. She still waited. Once until very late. When I came out, she was asleep against the wall. I didn't wake her. When she woke up and saw me, she was flustered. Did I keep you? I shook my head. Go back to your hotel. She stood up, hesitating. Do you think what I'm doing now is pathetic? I looked at her. You didn't think it was pathetic when I waited for you. Her face went pale instantly. After that day, she came less often. Not giving up, just realizing that some distances aren't bridged by making a few extra trips. She told me something later. Julian had a fight with her. Not crying, but accusing. Accusing her of becoming cold, cruel. For the first time, she didn't explain. And for the first time, she realized someone had always been standing behind her. She just never looked back. I listened without comment. We sat at the same table, but it felt like a line was drawn between us. She finally understood she wasn't chasing a person. She was chasing the person who used to stand still. And that person had moved on. I saw Elena again 6 months later. Not a planned meeting. She messaged saying she had some things she wanted to return to me in person. We chose a quiet restaurant near my office. I arrived early. When she came, she was earlier than the agreed time. Dressed simply, light makeup, looking significantly thinner. She sat down and placed a document envelope on the table. These are the papers you left back home, and the keys. I took it, glanced inside, and didn't ask further. Her movements were slow, like she was stalling. The waiter brought water, but she didn't touch it. Her fingers rested on the rim of the glass. How are you doing now? She asked. Pretty good, I said. It was a fact. The project was stable, and I had a solid rhythm here. My life needed no extra explanation. She nodded, stared at the tabletop for a while. Julian moved out, she suddenly said. I looked up. He had been staying at my place before, she added. Then, we fought pretty badly. I didn't respond. She continued. He thinks I changed. She said it softly. Actually, I didn't change. I just finally stopped and looked. She looked up at me. I always thought you'd be there. She said the words slowly, confirming every syllable. I nodded. I was there, I said. I just wasn't seen. Her eyes slowly reddened. But she didn't lose control like before. If I understood this sooner, could we still? She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't pick it up. The mood of the meal was calm. Too calm for a reunion. Halfway through, she suddenly asked, would you ever go back to how it was? She asked earnestly. I put down my fork and looked at her. How it was wasn't sweet, I said. It was me enduring. Her hand trembled slightly. She probably finally understood. The stability in her memory was actually space I had yielded, inch by inch. Are you still resentful? She asked. I thought about it. Not really. It wasn't about winning or losing or revenge. It was just no longer needing to prove anything. She was silent for a long time. Long enough for the sky outside to darken. I realized later, she whispered. I wasn't chasing you. She raised her head, voice raspy. I was chasing the man who was willing to wait. I didn't correct her, because she was right. It's just that that seat was empty now. When the bill came, she stood aside, not fighting for it. Walking out of the restaurant, she stopped. Will you contact me in the future? I looked at her. If necessary. That was the most honest answer I could give. She nodded, didn't ask more. We parted ways at the door. She went left, I went right. After a few steps, I didn't look back. Not deliberately. It was just that I didn't need to anymore. The night breeze was light. The street lights flickered on. I walked forward, my steps steady. In this book, finally, the hero didn't die of a broken heart, and the heroine didn't just grow up at his expense. I woke up. Story complete.